Bobby, I went to
All right.
Bobby. My son had his first soccer practice yesterday.
Did you coach?
Nah.
Good. Don't do
I thought I've been thinking about that a long time, man. Hags is like, you got to do it.
So
I don't, I don't know.
I coach both my kids now, and it's taken me about 3 years to basically figure out how to coach Knox because I'm either dad or a coach, and like I'm always wrong, and he never wants to listen, and
Right.
all that kind of stuff. But so I figured out the right balance. Piper's a lot easier to coach and a lot more responsive and can handle criticism and such. So it's, but at the same time, when I don't coach them and I step away and I see, what they're doing or what other coaches are doing, I'm like, all right, that's it. I gotta fix this. So it's, you'll go back and forth with it for forever. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer, but
Yeah.
I think coaching them past a certain age, when they're 9, 10, that's probably about the time I'm starting to look like, all right, now they need somebody else. It's more logistics things is probably why I'm doing it right now, to be honest, than anything. So,
Well, if he's any good, I'm just sending him right to you. I'll sit on the sideline with parents and chew gum and have headphones in.
It's so much nicer over there, although they badmouth you the whole time. It's funny because Mel sits on the sideline, and she doesn't come to a lot of stuff. So when she does, a lot of people know who she is, and then they'll say things about the coaches, the club, or different things, and she just like eavesdrops and brings it all back to me later and laughs about it.
Good.
That's why I always sat way away from all the parents because it just.
Well, it doesn't change.
It gets to be a little much.
Yeah, it doesn't change in college. Liz sits in the stands, and she hears some terrible things. Obviously outside of like, the drunk kids getting rowdy, she'll hear like parents say something. And it's like, I'm just gonna go tell my husband. Like, what are you doing?
Well, I'm sending you a bunch of good parents next year, so you'll have even more good stuff. Those guys though, so they're funny, but they won't hesitate to tell you what they're thinking either. It's just pretty.
They already do, man. I already do. I mean, one of the dads. I've been watching the boys a little bit lately, just keeping up with them, and the dads will, give me the little elbow nudge, like, "Hey, you see what he's doing there?" I'm like, "It's gonna look a little different next year," but yeah, it looks good. Looks good right now.
Yeah, he might be in a completely different position next year, trying to chase down guys that are 6'3", 200 pounds.
Right. The fun question always is, well, do you want him to play or not?
Yeah.
And they always kind of like, oh, I'll just sit in the stands and enjoy the show.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. So, hey, Bobby, we're calling this podcast "Tales from the Trail." The recruiting trail. I have Bobby O'Brien. He's what's your official title? Technical director.
Probably technical director of Virginia Legacy and Virginia Reign.
Right. In Williamsburg, Virginia. And he's here to kind of talk about the other perspective. We've had a lot of college coaches on here, and we're going to pick his brain about the youth side of things. And of course, we have Justin Chezem on here. Cheese, he's the head men's soccer coach at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia. And we're just kind of shooting the breeze about kids. These guys are in the thick of it with youth soccer and getting their kids through all that. So I envy you, and I don't envy you all at the same time. I miss it, that's for sure, but I don't really miss it. So anyway, Bobby, so you grew up there in Williamsburg, and which isn't like a soccer hotbed necessarily. It's not Northern Virginia. It's not Charlotte. It's not, wherever else. How did you, starting in high school, when did you decide you wanted to play in college, and how did you go through that process? And I won't say how long ago.
Well, I mean, it was multiple decades ago. So it was a while ago, but I'd say it was probably, middle school age that I decided, hey, I want to try to play, college soccer. I was actually at the time living in Gloucester County, which was even a smaller area that really didn't play soccer, and just to try to get some better competition and such. And then, really just fell in love with it. Then back then again, there wasn't readily available like EPL or soccer on TV. It was more or less whenever the national team played, you had to put your VCR tape in the thing and record it just so you could watch it later in the day. So a lot of the soccer at the highest level that I was exposed to was usually college soccer. We would go to a lot of William & Mary soccer games and so forth. So those were, to me, that was like the pinnacle of where you could go at that time. So fell in love with it and said, I wanted to try to play at that level. And my family then decided to move to Williamsburg at the start of high school. And, I was lucky enough to play on a really good team back then. There weren't that many clubs as there are now. I mean, there's multiple clubs in multiple cities now. And back then it was kind of the same 4 or 5 clubs or teams that were constantly, battling for the state championships and so forth. So if you could get on one of those teams or one of those clubs, generally when you went to recruiting events and so forth, you had all the eyes were on you. Nowadays, there's multiple leagues and multiple tournaments and there's just so many more kids playing soccer now than there were then. So it's a little bit more difficult now, but I had a good coach and people that were guiding me to how to communicate with coaches, how to keep them updated with my schedule, how to make sure I was getting in front of them either at camps or at tournaments. So it really, the one thing that hasn't really changed is that it's pretty much a self-recruiting process, like Cheese can probably say, but over the course of the season. And a lot of them are probably just generic, form letters and so forth. And you have to be specific and really show that you want to attend that school or be at that school. And at the time, Virginia Tech was that option, and I had family ties there and so forth. So I knew a lot about the campus and programs and things they had. So I was able to constantly speak about those things and about my desire to be there, not just as an athlete, but, academically as well, which I think eventually kind of separates you from other people that may just blast out, 30 or 40 emails to every Division I coach or Division III coach, and half the time get their name wrong because they're just, not doing the research or the information that they need to make sure it's the right fit for them.
Right. And so how have you seen that evolve over time? Like from when you were doing it to
again,
now?
just sheer numbers of kids playing, we'll have kids on our teams, and they're very good teams, but the kids on our teams going, hey, I want to go to school X or Y. And I'm like, well, those schools are pulling kids from all around the nation. You're not necessarily even the best player on your own team within the whole state of Virginia. So we try to educate them on almost the levels or the tiers that they're at, so that they're not overshooting, and wasting time, trying to chase down schools and levels of play that realistically probably aren't going to be interested in them, and trying to steer their focus to schools that fit what they're looking for athletically, but also academically, and probably most importantly, socially too. And because of soccer. And then after a year, they've come back to us and said, yeah, the soccer was great, but that was only 4 months out of the year. And the academics are great, but socially, I'm not having a good time. I'm not having a good experience with the type of people that are here, or the area of the country I'm in, or the extracurricular activities or other sports or things going on at the school. And that's probably the biggest thing that we encourage kids to really look at it. The parents want the academics, the kids want the soccer, but are they both looking at the social aspect of college? Because it should be, one of the best times of your life, and you don't want it to be a burden or a job, or you want them to enjoy themselves. So trying to match up kids with their personalities that we know of them, with school that we know that might fit those dynamics. And a lot of times it's schools they've never even heard of or know about, because, they watch college football on TV and college basketball, and they see, the cool environment. You're like, hey, I'm going to that ACC school because they have, awesome football and basketball programs. So I'll just play soccer there too. And don't look into the things that, really would separate them from being able to do that or not do that.
Right.
Bobby, what do you think of those conversations? You got a kid in your office, and he's giving you his list or her list, and you're like, oh boy, and you're going to have to hit them. You're going to have to hit them with some honesty, and mom's sitting right there, and you're like, oh boy, here we go. And like, what do you think of those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one. I mean, but we've learned. If you just rip the Band-Aid off, then generally it goes a lot better after the initial shock. And then as long as we have some data or some information to like give them some better options, um, one of the things that usually then quickly settles the nerves or the anxiety of it all is something we've talked about, Cheese, and I think Coach Shaw usually always mentioned it at his college presentations he would do for us. But basically you have 80 games left in your soccer career. Get to college, roughly 20 a year. Maybe it's more than that now, 25 or so. How many of those games do you want to play? So you got 100 games left in your career. Do you want to play 20? Do you want to play 50? Do you want to play 100? And that's where usually we can rein the parents to go to Wake Forest and UVA, UNC, and Duke. We can go, okay, you might be able to play at the bottom of the roster and eventually work your way up and be a training player or a good teammate kind of guy. But you also might only play 5 or 10 games in your entire career, if that. Or here's a list of schools that we know that you can play at that have these things that you're looking for, mom and dad, academically, and have these things you're looking for socially, Jimmy or Johnny or Susie or whoever it is. And by the way, there you can play 60 or 70 or 80 games. And generally they're excited about playing and not sitting. They've been playing every minute, almost of every game their whole life. As elite soccer players, and then they don't want to necessarily stop doing that. So just explain to them that there are other good options out there that they can continue playing competitively and enjoy themselves and compete for championships and things at different levels, instead of just being able to post on Instagram one time in their sweatshirt that they're a Division I athlete, but then kind of never heard from again because it's just too difficult, and they're out recruited year over year, or even more international people are coming into the mix now. And I don't envy your guys' jobs as college coaches, because you mostly have good situations, but at the same time you have to win. You can't really. I can spend 8 years trying to develop a player and make a better person, a better soccer player, if you don't get results at certain levels, and you don't have the time to develop kids. You have to go in the portal, and you got to find kids that can come in and compete right away, or graduate seniors or international kids. Because if you don't win, your AD could be like, hey, yeah, we need a different coach in here, and then you're out of a job. So I get it from both sides, that the days of being able to go to a college as a freshman and work your way up and then play as a junior and senior at most programs, aren't really there as options anymore. So trying to make sure the kids find the right fit so they don't get into those situations.
Yeah, I've noticed, your job's, extremely difficult. It's the low hanging fruit, the one where the kid comes in and like, hey, this school just offered me a full ride. You can name them. Those are just so few and far between. So really what you find yourself is for every single situation, the immediate response is it depends, ... And then you start filling in the rest of it. And, there's been great kids that, I'm not going to name them here, but you know them. I coached with you for a long time. And, there was a kid that I said, you need to go to Virginia Tech. He was a great player. A lot of great D3 schools were interested. A couple D1 early on, but he picked up an injury, so he kind of fell behind a little bit, but had some awesome situations. Could not play at Virginia Tech. They weren't offering him, but he was an awesome student, rock star, wanted to study mechanical engineering, and they accepted him into the school. And I told the kid, I was like, well, I'm withdrawing my offer. You have to go to school there. That's the right decision for you, your family, for 4.5, 5 years from now. And, the kid's doing great. I've kept up with the kid pretty well, and, he's grateful. He played club soccer. He had his awesome soccer experience as well. And so that's just one of how many examples have you gone through in the last 10 years where you're like, wow, I can tell you a kid will walk in your room, he'll tell you his story, mom will explain certain things, and you've got 6 stories that are comparable that were all a little different. This kid chose here, went great. This kid chose here, failed. This is why, and the experience is huge. And, the one thing I am curious about is how are you keeping up with, being a Virginia club, and most of these kids know that in Virginia, we have lots of great schools and different options to choose from. How are you kind of like keeping up with how to answer each question? Because, it's easy for me. You give me a call, we'll chat about the program, it takes 5 minutes. You work with Norris and William and Mary, but like you have to keep all those relationships going because, what school in Virginia isn't brought up in the recruiting talks that you're having with these kids?
Yeah, that's very difficult. We do rely heavily on like our coaches. So at our oldest age groups, we've got 2 college coaches there that we can rely on and encourage the kids to reach out to them individually as coaches because they have that dynamic a little bit. When I'm coaching the older teams, it is reaching out to people like yourself and other college coaches that we may have connections with. We've come across, or players we've sent. We may have sent players to their programs in the past, and just trying to keep open lines of communication about what they're looking for. But yeah, that's definitely difficult with the massive amount we have. To be honest, I wish the interaction, although, was a little bit more. Sometimes we tell the kids what they need to be doing and how to do it, but now the ball's in their court, and a lot of times they might just drop that ball, and then they come back to us, December of their senior year going, oh yeah, I think I want to play college soccer now. And I'm like, okay, well, if you've done all the steps that you should have done in the last year that we've kind of told you about, and a lot of times they haven't, and maybe that's on us a little bit of not constantly following up, but at the same time, if it's that kid's decision, it's that family's decision to want to do those things. I want to win games. I want to do lots of things, but I can't live my life vicariously through all these kids. They've got to take it upon themselves if they're wanting to do certain things and have the effort and drive to do that. Because if they do it now, when they do get to that college, they'll have that same type of work ethic, and then they'll probably succeed. It's those players that are wishy-washy that probably won't make it at the next level anyways, because if going gets tough or whatever, they might just back off. So trying to constantly talk to them and encourage them to do these sort of things, but it's a lot of times we do leave the ball in court to be communicating. We tell them don't have your parent communicate with the coach. Make sure it's the kids that are reaching out and keeping the coach updated of where you're going to be, or even just following their seasons. Hey, send them a note in the fall. Hey, congrats on your win last week. I was following online. Nowadays, you can watch so much college soccer, online through streaming and so forth. So the access for these kids to interact with you guys as college coaches it's much different than it was in the past. So I encourage them to try to take advantage of that.
Well, and you can't have a conversation about recruiting where you aren't on the front end asking them, well, let me ask you first, what are you looking for? What are your grades? What's important to you? How far from home? What's your financial situation? You can't have any conversation on where that kid could choose to go to school without asking 10, 15 questions on the front end to help them narrow down their field to, look, there's 50 awesome choices here in Virginia alone. Let's get that thing down to 5 based off of your own criteria.
Sure.
And to your point, that's where the kids have to do their homework before they even come knock on your door. Before they reach out to you, they need to know a lot of those questions ahead of time so that when they are coming to you, they're like, all right, Bobby, this is what we can afford. This is what we're looking for. I want to do this socially. That's a great thing you mentioned earlier. What level can we play? And then all of a sudden that conversation goes from you asking so many questions so early and then them not knowing the answer, or like, wow, I didn't think about these things, to here's 5 schools that I think make perfect sense for you. I've got awesome relationships with all of them, and I could at least find out what they need. Do they,
Sure.
how many people are they bringing in? Do they need a left back like you play, or whatever it is? And it's sad to say this, but it really is. They have to come in way more prepared before they even knock on your door.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's and some of them are on the ball, but there's a lot that we're constantly trying to say. It's you got to get ahead of the game. You got to get ahead of the game, and like any teenager, procrastination is just one of those traits, and that we try to encourage out of them so that they don't fall into those holes or fall behind, because they're competing with their peers. They're competing with every team in the state of Virginia and the leagues that they're playing in, and then they're also competing with teams from outside the area and stuff too. And I don't think they realize the level of competition, amount of kids. I mean, the level of soccer is really good now too. I mean, at any league, sorry, any league, you can really find players. And I usually tell the kids, when you go out and watch a game, there's 22 kids on the field. You can usually pick out the two best players on the entire field, and that's probably what most college coaches are doing. And you can probably pick out the two worst players on the field, and then the other 18 in the middle, like they're all pretty similar. So you're fighting against all those players to try to stand out, and you got to find ways to do that, whether it's on the field or off the field or through connections and stuff you have. So trying to differentiate yourself is the biggest thing we try to probably press to them, which is obviously the hardest thing to do.
What's kind of like the timeline when you're telling kids to get started, as far as reaching out to coaches, and what's your recommendation as to how they reach out to them?
I mean, I'd say generally, for girls and boys, it's very different. But generally, for our club and the level of players we have, it's usually fall of their junior year, are they starting the process? So maybe spring of their sophomore year, they're dabbling in some ID camps and things like that, and trying to at least get their name out there. But realistically, coaches are looking at juniors and seniors depending on where they're at in their recruiting processes. So I'd say probably junior year, we're encouraging them to start reaching out to people and sending an email introducing yourself and kind of what team you play on, what club you're from, what your tournament schedule looks like, what league you play in, and that you'll constantly be following up with them with any pertinent information as they go on. And again, encouraging them to try to differentiate themselves through as they reach out to that school is hey, I'm a 4.2 student, and academically I want to be an engineer, and I recognize that you have one of the best engineering programs on the East Coast, and I really think I'd be a good academic fit for those kind of things, or anything they can do to kind of connect themselves to the school. That obviously that same sentence or whatnot couldn't go into another email to another school, because it wouldn't be as specified. So trying to encourage them to do those kind of things as well, and do a little research on the school, both academically and athletically, so that they can speak to that in their initial email, and maybe draw the coach's eye to them a little bit as well, because they've put in a little bit more effort than maybe the next kid that sends a similar email.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard all you guys cheese. Go ahead. I know what you're going to say.
I don't know. Right. I wanted to follow up on it because you mentioned the guys and girls thing. And yeah, I mean, the timelines are incredible. I mean, it blows my mind when I was coaching with you and I had a girls team, to have a girl that's 14 years old in ninth grade on my team that I just picked up 2 months earlier. And, the Power 5 top D1 programs calling me about this kid. I'm just like, you probably won't use this kid for 5 more years. How are you already recruiting her? But they have to. She was a fantastic player, and I got it. I'm like, oh man, it just blew my mind. Like, they're not going to use this kid for 5 more years, and how different is she going to be from 14 to 19 or to 20 when she finally can get on the field and help a big time program? And so to stay along that theme though, between guys and girls, you've got a really good girl in your office, or a really good guy just left. What is the difference? Obviously, you have the timeline, but what are those conversations like where I'll just guess that the boys are mainly just focused on the soccer? Like, I want to play soccer here. They're not looking at pretty much anything else. It's my experiences with most of these kids in my office, and maybe the girl is looking at, oh, I like it. This is close to the beach, or I like this. Are you noticing a theme there between boys and girls?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's I mean, that's the theme. It's the same theme in club soccer. I mean, a lot of girls play soccer still because they want to be with their friends and socially play. And we can move boys around to different teams. And hey, we need people over here, and they're like, okay, I'll go play. Like they just want to play soccer. They don't care who it's with. They want to play as much as they can. The girls' side of soccer, at least at our club level, has a lot more social based, friendship based. Or are my friends doing it? Do they have a connection to want to do it? And then that translates obviously into college too. Like, hey, what area of the country do I want to live in? You can put a boy in pretty much any area of the country. If they have a good soccer team, he'll be like, all right, doesn't matter. I'm just going to play soccer the whole time. And obviously the girls typically need a little bit more of the extracurricular things, but that's not wrong. That's actually right. Like, and that's what we try to tell the boys too, is that you can't get blinded by, oh, that team was a top 10 soccer team last year, because that could change on a dime. And if you get injured or something happens and you're in the middle of, nowhere at a school that you don't enjoy being, and it rains 8 months out of the year and it's all never sunny, like, are you going to enjoy your experience at the college, not just on the soccer field?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to find the medium and the balance between, what the girls and boys are both thinking. And again, the parents are always just going, well, what are the academics? What are the academics? So we try to tell them too, you can't just necessarily look at the overall academic, profile of the school. Like maybe you want to be something specified, a veterinarian or an engineer or whatever it is. And maybe that school across the board isn't great academically, but looking at, then, a lot of times the parents don't necessarily look at that. They just hear certain schools or know of certain schools and they go, well, that one's not very good academically. Well, they might not be in 8 out of 10 things, but in 2 things, they're actually the best. And you should actually look at them for those things, or just if that's what your kid is interested in. So really just encouraging parents and kids to dive in to the schools and the programs, especially that they're interested in, and not just, Googling it and whatever the first hit that comes up and going, oh, this school's not good enough for my kid, or whatnot. So
right. I talk to kids all the time, and they'll say, it's a good school academically, but they're not digging into the little small things. They'll just type in on Google, like, oh, the average kid's a 3.9. That's a good school.
Yeah.
But inside the one topic you want to study, what's their track record of dumping kids into an awesome master's program, or their internships that are built in or are so fantastic. So I know I'm going to get a job right when I graduate. And the study abroad programs, some of them are built into school, some of them you got to do on their own. But these are the things I try to get kids to understand, that when you graduate, there's going to be thousands and thousands of other kids that just graduated the same day or that week or whatever, that all have the exact same sheet of paper that you do, that are going to be looking for the exact same jobs that you're looking for. So how are you going to separate yourself? What are you going to do during your 4 years? What's the school's track record of placing kids post grad? What can you expect? And that's, while it's not guaranteed, you could ask all those questions to the university, to the admissions department, and they're going to have all those answers locked in, and they're going to be able to help you. That's going to really sift through and separate a lot of schools that might be tied for some reason, but this school has some awesome program built into this thing you want to study. And next thing you know, you're like, well, I definitely want to do that in 4.5 years. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're saying a lot of these things. We've had too many kids come in the last, since I've been doing this for 20 years now, that you're like, wow, this kid has no idea what he's looking for. All he did was hear, oh yeah, good soccer team. Doesn't know anything else. And I definitely agree with you that on the girls' side, they're focused on those things a little bit more. It's like the dorms, the dining halls. I mean, what's Virginia Tech ranked nationally in dining now?
They're usually pretty high, and we tell the kids that too. Like, what gear do they get? What are the teams wearing? Like, how much extra swag and stuff do they get to keep? You mentioned abroad. Are there soccer teams and stuff taking trips to abroad for preseason, or are they playing games around the country? That was one of the greatest things about playing, I thought, was road trips with the team, road trips with your buddies, getting to see different areas of the country. So are you always playing in the same little bubble, or are you going to Texas and going to California and going into the Northeast, getting on a plane, doing different things that are life experiences that can, separate those certain programs out from others that may not be doing those things. But yeah, I mean, dorms, food, you know, how big is the dorms? Do they have AC? I mean, most dorms are pretty nice now, but back when I was going through it, there were dorms that didn't have air conditioning, and you had to pick schools based on some of these outlying things that you didn't necessarily think you're going to have to look at. What's the class ratio? Are you in classes that are 20-1, or are you stuck in a bunch of lecture hall type classes where it's 200-1? And some kids do better in those situations, and some kids don't. They fall behind. So diving into those things, I think, is really important, and not looking at all the other things, because like you said, things you mentioned, you're asking them to think 4, 5, 6 years ahead, and they want to think about tomorrow and when they get to play soccer next, or whatever. So really laying it out there for them that certain decisions they make now can really affect their future, and that they'll look back on it in a couple of years and hopefully thank us for driving them a little bit the right direction. Sure, I would love to say X amount of kids play college soccer this year and post it all over Instagram and stuff like that. But, more importantly, I'd rather have those kids come back to me and say, thank you for the advice. By going to this school and playing club soccer and getting this degree was better than going to this school and saying I played collegiate soccer, but now I'm behind because I had to transfer to go to grad school to do this, to get that job that my buddies got, because they chose a different route. So that's generally where we align. And some clubs are most clubs are like that, I think. And we don't push kids to certain situations. We're going to make sure at least they've thought it through before they kind of make their commitment.
Sure. So no, I think you brought up a huge point. You're talking about travel. You're talking about being with the team, and I played. You played as well, and my best memories weren't on the field. And when I talk to my alums or guys that I played with, we aren't reminiscing about some big win or some goal that was scored. I didn't score it, but somebody else might have scored it. I'm talking about the bus trips, the post-win hangout session at the guy's house, or, the guys love talking about the flights. You go on a big flight, you're going to spend 3 or 4 days together and play some awesome games, but the meals on the road, stuff like that. I mean, that's the experience that most kids, they don't even think about. And, we do alumni events all the time. We have a pretty strong alumni, and right when I got the head job, I kind of sat back and was like, I was more organizing and stuff than anything. So I wasn't just an alum doing all the hanging out and the fun stuff. I had to kind of make sure the event was running well. So it's a whole different role. And I just sat back and I was listening to all the conversations. And I tell kids this all the time now in recruiting, because they like to ask about culture. And I bring up my alums, because there's no way to really talk about culture. What coach is going to give you a bad report on the culture of their program? And so I always bring up my alums, and I'm sitting there. We're at a golf tournament. We're up there at Kiskiak. We're playing golf. We're now post. You've been to the event. So we're now after the event. They're just hanging out. They're all laughing. They're all, telling lies, all that fun stuff. But if you really sit down and you listen, they don't ever talk about the soccer. They never talk. That's the whole reason they were there. And they don't even talk about it. We've had some alums that were extremely successful and had some pretty good teams, and they're not even talking about that. They're talking about some funny story that happened, or something in the locker room, or a bus trip, or their current lives, their wives, their kids, something like that, depending on how old they are. And they almost never talk about the soccer. And we're talking about these kids that are making decisions because of soccer, and they don't realize that has to be secondary, or third or fourth down the line, because the other part of it's going to be what you're going to remember for the rest of your life. And I wish more kids would try to engulf that, try to embrace that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point too with the alumni, and I think that's important to and we've done that sometimes too. When we have kids that are like, I want to go to this school. If we know we have a kid that's gone there in the past or whatever, we'll try to connect them to get their input on what their experience was and stuff. But I'm in group chats with guys that I played with, but I'm also in same group chats that have guys that played 20 years before me and 12 years after me, and we're all talking about the same things. And because, we played with one guy who's 3 years younger, but he played with a guy 3 years younger, and he played with a guy that's 3 years younger, and they're all connected through individual people. And then you all talk about the same things and bring back memories and stuff. And it's, that's why I urge kids to want to play at the next level. It's not, necessarily I'm going to be a professional soccer player or this, an extension of your competition and competing, what you've done your whole life, but also, creating a new family for yourself, or friendships and connections and so forth, and networking. I think that's obviously one of the coolest parts about it, for sure. I'm pretty sure, anybody those kind of things would give the same answer. Is that funny, like, Instagram thing that pops up? I think it's a Boston College basketball player, and it's like his last game press conference, and they ask what's he's going to miss the most, and he starts tearing up and all this stuff, and it's like a long pause, and he goes, dinner with the guys or something like that, and everyone's like waiting, elaborate answer, and he literally was like, I'm just going to miss like dinner with my buddies, like afterwards and stuff like that. And it's like hits home. So
it's so accurate. It's so accurate.
And that speaks to the importance of doing the homework up front and really understanding the places that you're looking at going, and making sure that it's the right place, not just any old place, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to like the people that are there. I mean, so we, you brought the thing up with girls, and they're having to make commitments a lot of times before they can even make official visits. And, we're encouraging kids to, take your time when you can, because you want to be able to take those visits, those overnights, be around the people, be around the team, see if those people mesh with you. I mean, not every person is the same. There's lots of different types of people out there, and there's not a wrong or right answer about it, but people just like different things and, act different ways. And if you're at a school that doesn't fit your dynamic, what you like to do, then generally that'll seep through. You're with guys on the soccer team that, you don't get along with, or players that, just act ways that you don't enjoy, then, you're going to have a bad experience there too, no matter how good the soccer team is or isn't. So turning over every stone that you can, and trying to get, acclimated to what life is like there as a soccer player, and who the people are around you, to judge if you're going to enjoy, being friends with for the rest of your life, or, you're just getting in and this is miserable and can't wait to leave, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's really tough. I mean, we brought up that girl from earlier who was a freshman, and let's say an offer came, and she needed to make a decision right away because they had some other superstar in California, another superstar in Texas, and basically, I'm going to you first. If you say no in the next week, I'm going somewhere else. You have a week, and it's interesting to your point, like you just said, they haven't been there with the team yet, or even if they have, it's kind of they're trying to break any rules, of course, and then what's that roster going to look like when they get there? And I mean, 90% of those girls will be gone. Only the current, if you're a sophomore, only the current freshmen will still be there when you arrive, and they're going to be seniors. They're going to be focusing on their final year. They got whatever internships. They're in a whole different world. Your relationship with them is going to be small, especially once the fall ends and you're not playing soccer anymore. They're definitely diving into just whatever I need to do to get out of here and graduate. So you've got a whole locker room filled with people that you don't even know, you never met before, and that's a tough dynamic, tough one to choose from. And I tell this story a lot about a buddy of mine that runs camps, and he coached this awesome girls team, and I brought up something to him a few years ago when I had one of the girls teams in your club, and about transferring, and he said he was so upset. He had a team that won the national championship, so club national title, awesome team. I don't know the exact number, but I want to say 11 or 12 of them went Division I. And he had said that some of them were committing just because another girl committed. They felt like they had to commit immediately. And that was one huge red flag that I wanted everybody to know that's not the right reason for you to commit. And then the other red flag was, he said 9. I remember that number. 9 of whoever it was, 11 or 12 girls went Division I. 9 of them transferred after the first year. And this isn't a knock on Division I. I'm not saying that, but what the alarming word was transfer. 9 out of those girls transferred, and to the point of deciding way too early or not doing enough homework on the front end. And jumping the gun is clearly what's happening here, and it's sad. You don't want to see these kids in the portal. You don't want to see these kids. Nobody's picking a school knowing, oh, I'm going to transfer here in a year. You're not making that decision. You want to stay there. You want that to be your home. And it's sad. I don't like how I use the portal. So I'm going to sound like a hypocrite here a little bit, but as a parent, as someone that actually cares about these kids, it does, like, you see a kid in there, you know him, and you go like, oh, like, I'm going to reach out to him because he's a good player, but like, darn, like, it didn't work out for him in the process. Sure. It's too bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly the ideal scenario to have to transfer. So, yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking you guys probably have specific stories of kids that have come up through the club there, and then, geez, you've known about. And I guess if you have like specifics, where something worked out and something maybe didn't work out in another instance, just to provide, just to kind of color in, like, with specific examples of things how things have gone for kids and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I got a couple. I mean, there's one really good player we had a couple years ago, and he went to a Division III school, and they were a good soccer program. And as a freshman, he made all conference and so forth, and was a really good player, but didn't love socially the people, the vibe of the school that he was at. So he transferred to a Division I school to not play soccer. The captain of the club soccer team at that school, and they won a club national championship, and they were able to compete around the nation and do those kind of things. He also was a practice player for the women's team, and they were either national champions or runners up too. So he was able to like compete and be around high level soccer and a lot of good players. And when he became the captain of the club soccer team, I was asking him questions about tryouts and stuff, and he had mentioned that like 200 players came to like his club soccer tryout, and they only took 24 kids or whatever it is. So like a lot of really good players that pick academic schools because they're some of the best schools in the nation here and around us in Virginia, and they can't play soccer at them, but they can do other things there that satisfy those needs, and then can move on. There's also players that the flip side of that, when could have gone to Division I schools and sat a little bit, and they have then choose a different school where they can go play immediately, and then they have a great 4-year career and become 2-time All-Americans and have a great experience that way. So it really is individual, but underlying theme can be hammer home of what they're getting themselves into to have the best well-rounded experience. And sometimes that athletic experience might not be an official NCAA level. It may be something else, intramural club soccer or something of that nature. And sometimes it is the NCAA experience, but you got to make sure you have the social aspect. You're in the area you want to live in. My own brother went to William and Mary here in town, and great academic school, great soccer program. But after 2 years, was like, okay, I've grown up in Williamsburg. Now I'm in school in Williamsburg. I want to do something different socially. People hang out over and over and over again. We do the same things. So he transferred to a bigger school, doesn't play soccer, and doesn't regret it for one bit, because he had a great experience playing other sports there and doing other things and being a college student too. So I've seen stories from both sides of the thing, and it's really up to each individual kid to follow what it is that they're really looking for, not what I want and not what Cheese wants and not what mom and dad want. To be honest, it's what drives them. Right. That's going to make that best experience over the next 4 or 5 years that will make them enjoy it on the back end and thank whoever had a hand in it.
Staying on the topic of your brother, since he transferred and went to a place, and then he was on the team though, right? But he just didn't get on the field. Is
Yeah,
that what you're saying?
he had to back then the transfer was much different. He had to sit for a year,
Yeah,
so
right.
he transferred. William Mary had a pretty strict transfer rule at that time that so he had to sit for a whole year. So he trained and did everything for a whole year, and then at that time it was just like, all right, I'm like burnt out. Like I've done nothing but practice for a whole year, knowing it's very difficult to go to practice every day, knowing that you're never going to play in the game because you can't. But to give that level of commitment needed to like try to compete, I think just became too difficult on him to be like, I could be doing other things with my time. I could, repurpose it elsewhere, and that's kind of what he did at the time. And
Yeah.
it's worked out well for him. So,
Well, let me ask you this: do you think that it took the experience before he realized that, or do you think that he could have, if he went through the whole process again, started back as a junior in high school? Do you think that he could have done something differently and figured out those answers before he committed, then just went straight to Virginia Tech
I
immediately?
think he does it again. He does it differently.
Okay.
Similar to some of the things you brought up earlier, but at the time, the year before, William Mary was in the top 25. So like he was like, oh, it's a top 25 program. He had a connection with Norris and the other coaches that were there. They were coaching him in the club, so he felt comfortable with them. It was almost the safe thing to do and not step out of his comfort zone. He's in town. There was a really good team that we always played against at a Beach FC, and 2 kids committed there as well. So not saying he committed there because his buddies committed there and good players, but that helped knowing like, oh man, they're going to be even better. So I think he was blinded by, again, the academics allure of William Mary, who wouldn't be, and the athletic allure of they were a top 25 program at the time, into enough consideration some of the social aspects of things that he ended up loving when he transferred to Virginia Tech and was able to be a part of a bigger school, bigger community, extracurricular activity, those kind of things. Because he had those options before choosing William Mary. They weren't at Virginia Tech, but there were other Division I that had similar type of things that he could be doing. And I don't think he thought of all those things. And I think now, knowing what he knows, he would probably choose a little bit different. Although I don't think he regrets the way it's worked out. He's still great friends with those players and connection to William Mary and in town and stuff. So everything works out for a reason, I think. But he would probably do it differently, I think.
Well, I think you brought up a super interesting point when you said he transferred. So he had to sit out a year. He technically had soccer taken away for an entire year. So we had to look at his life and his situation from a different lens. And a lot of kids went through that with COVID. The kids in college, for example, that was taken from them. They couldn't play at all. And I know in Division I, they kind of had a season in the spring. And so maybe it may have felt like it wasn't fully taken away, but it's just been interesting to see how kids who have had soccer completely taken away, whether it's through COVID, like your brother transferring, or like I was on the phone with an alum yesterday whose daughter just recently tore her ACL. So soccer was taken away from her for a year while she's recovering. And it's interesting when you talk to those kids and now how their recruiting process goes or their decision process goes, knowing that there are certain things that are completely off the table now. Now you almost are forced to really focus on everything else besides soccer. And while I don't want everybody to tear their ACL or have to transfer or something, have to sit out a year, it almost helps you answer all these other questions. And so, it's to the point of, if you never play a single minute of soccer, whether you're on the team or not, are you going to be happy at that school? And that's the only question that truly, truly matters. That's going to lead to these fun alumni conversations that you and I were just talking about. That's the only way. I mean, inside of those group chats, they loved their experience, and I just wish more kids would kind of try to put themselves in those situations. It's hard. I get it. I was 16 once. Like you talked about in the beginning, the recruiting process was different. You got letters in the mail. That was the process. And I can't tell you, I just threw away. I'm like, I don't even know what that school is. What's a Christopher Newport? Who's that guy? I just threw it in the trash probably. I can't imagine the letters that were just gone that I could have at least looked at and like, wow, what a great school. But yeah, Yeah, it's such an interesting one. I'm going to share this story with that alum whose dad or whose daughter is now torn ACL, just to remind them that it's not over. They're going to find an awesome place, and they may have luckily fell into something that they wouldn't have done the other way.
Yeah, I mean, he repurposed what his major was. He got into something different, ended up going to grad school, and I mean now he's the head sports nutritionist for the Atlanta Braves. I mean, he's working for a professional sports organization. You know, on the field, traveling with the team every game. I mean, so like he's doing what we all would want to be doing right now. To be honest, is like working with professional athletes on a daily basis. And he was a soccer guy that never even liked that, but got into sports and nutrition, those type of things. And he had that time to like look at, okay, what do I want to do? I'm not doing soccer anymore. What do I want to do to set myself up to have the best life experiences? And that's what he did. And I think again, a lot of kids may not do that. They're just focused on soccer, and then it gets to spring of their graduation year, and they're like, okay, now what am I going to do? That soccer's over, and they didn't necessarily think about all the things they could be doing on the way through running to set themselves up on the back end.
You were just down there, right?
I think I saw pictures. Visited them over spring break.
Yeah. Were you at the Padres game?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Padres fan. I think that was the game that the Braves won. I'm like, man,
yeah, I went to the one game they won, walk off in the ninth inning. It was pretty cool. And then
that's cool. The
next. I told him that like I became a true Braves fan that night. So Friday morning was my first day being a Braves fan, and then they lost the next 3 games. So I put the jinx on them. Generally, teams I'm fans of like don't do well. So I told them that's my fault. So
I got a couple, Scott. There's the oldest team now. I've got 4 of those kids coming to us. I actually offered, I think, 2 other ones. One's still undecided. One's going to a different school for great reasons for him and his family. But there's a kid on that team that I helped. I never even really talked to the kid. I liked him a lot. I thought he could play for me. But once I heard what he wanted to study, I was like, oh, well, he shouldn't have come to CNU. So I didn't even recruit the kid. But as soon as I heard what he wanted to study and some of the schools he was zeroing in on or who was talking to him, I kind of was realizing who was recruiting him. I knew of 2 or 3 schools right away that would make perfect sense, and reached out to those schools. They immediately went to go watch the kid. I think he made an awesome decision. He wanted to study a certain type of engineering, and to the kid's credit, he did the research. He found a couple schools that made perfect sense, and I'll be honest with you, around here, I guarantee you he was going to mention those schools, and definitely the kids on the team are probably like, where is that? But it's a great school, great academic fit up in Pennsylvania. And he found another school actually down the road from them in Pennsylvania that I know the coach really well. He's a great man. I think he's going to love playing for him. And I think he can get on the field pretty quickly. And he's going to get the exact degree that he wanted. And, I mean, kudos to him. I would have taken him. I think that Norris even had a little bit of interest early on. So he had a high D3 into the Division I level that he could have sought out. And he found a great Division III program that has the exact fit academically, and he went up for a visit and liked the small town feel. It was a good situation for him, and the chances of him being in the portal and not being happy is so small. And I mean, just kudos to him, and I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about, Bobby. There's another kid that we both know really, really, really well that played for both of us, and he had an interesting story. He went through the COVID situation and did not like where he wanted to go or where he was, and had nothing to do with soccer, had nothing to do with the school. He just was like, you know what? I just need a change. Something happened to me. He needed a change. This is going to happen. So as bad as transfer portal can be for some kids because they're making the wrong decisions, I think this kid actually made a good decision early, and it just changed on him. It just completely changed. And kind of like your brother, it changed maybe. Maybe he did make the absolute best decision if he were to do it over again and would still transfer. So there are positives here. And to this kid's credit, I took him out to breakfast. He wanted to talk about a few things. And I knew he was going to probably end up at a Division III place. So I sent him as far away from me as I possibly could because I didn't want to play against him. And, I think he's found an awesome home. He's scoring a bunch of goals, and he loves it down there. And he basically was like, I want to be in a big city. I want to play for a great soccer team. I don't care what the division is. I just want to be another piece to their puzzle that's striving for national championships. And I want to have an opportunity to do something great when I graduate. And, so the kid did his homework, and unfortunately it had to be after going through something that was uncomfortable or something he didn't like, which the COVID situation was that for him, just like thousands of other kids across the country. And, so it's as much as I talk about the transfer portal, and it could be negative to talk about in the front end for these kids. You don't want to be in there. Obviously, you don't want to be in there, but if you find yourself in a situation like your brother or like this other kid we're talking about, you can use it. You can use it and go through the process again, and you're probably looking at it in a completely different lens. And I think overall, that's what we're trying to get the kids to do as 16-year-olds, rather than waiting for something to happen or waiting for you to completely change your mindset on what you want to do with the next few years of your life.
Yeah, it's tough to convince 16-year-olds that they don't know everything, right?
Yeah.
We were all 16-year-old boys at one point.
13-year-old that she doesn't know everything. So I think the scale's only getting worse the wrong direction.
Right.
Bobby, girls do know everything. So it's the boys that are the problem. Yeah, my daughter was way more mature than me at age 13. So probably still is. So yeah, you guys have anything else? We're coming up on an hour. Be respectful of everyone's time here.
That was great.
Cheese, you got anything?
No, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
What's that?
I know it's really good. I guess we're gonna have to have another O'Brien on. It'd be good to have a little nutrition talk on here too.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be happy to do that. He'll do whatever. He loves still talking soccer and stuff too. So
yeah, all these kids think they can drink Coke and eat Doritos and everything. So probably need to know what that does.
He has told me some stories, not necessarily about the Braves, but before that, he was with the Milwaukee Bucks, and he was also did some things in some preseason stuff with the Redskins and the Eagles one year. And he said like the rookies would come in, they would just like plow through donuts and just all kinds of stuff, but like they look like, I mean, it was like star running backs and stuff that he can't eat those 6 donuts. If he wants those donuts, eat them. Like I'll go work with the linemen on what they should be eating to trim down a little bit. I'm not telling the middle linebacker that he can't eat that. Head off, so. Yeah,
genetics are a big help too. So we don't all have those. Cool. Yeah, if you guys don't have anything else, we can wrap it up. And it's really grateful for your time, Bobby. That was really good to get another perspective from the youth end of things.
You guys having me.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It was awesome.
Yeah. So I'll hit stop here.